I went because I was a real Murray McLaughlin fan. And Murray was just sort of starting out at that time. And so I went to see him on the Saturday workshop. And he gets up on the stage and he says, "I'm not going to be playing today." And I was very let down. I thought, that's disappointing. He says, "My friend Joni Mitchell is here from Los Angeles." So Joni Mitchell got up, sang 5 songs.
You're listening to the Behind the Village podcast.
Our guest today is Mariposa Folk Festival historian Michael Hill.
So, Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself then? Why don't we start there?
Well, I'm a former teacher. Like I taught for 15 years in Scarborough. Then I came to Simcoe County and taught for 16 years here. I have 2 daughters and 4 grandchildren and a little white dog. And I've had a long, long history with Mariposa and folk music.
Tell me about that. Like, how did you get started with Mariposa?
Well, I got started with this kind of music is the kind of music I've liked ever since I was in high school. You know, I always loved Simon and Garfunkel and Gordon Lightfoot, Cat Stevens, James Taylor. You know, performed in university and in like in coffee houses and things like that. Although didn't ever make it. not that I really tried either. And then I knew about the Mariposa Folk Festival. I was actually at the historic one in 1972, and then I was living in Orillia in 2000 when it came back, and I thought, I'll volunteer, and it's a way to get a free ticket. And I kind of got reeled in. So the first year I was just part of the crew. The second year they wanted me to be the site coordinator, and then the next year I was the organizer for the entire festival. And then I was asked to be on the board of directors, and we let our previous artistic director go in 2006, and I immediately put up my hand and said, "I'd like to take on that job." Just kind of being it's not really my personality to be aggressive like that, but this was something that really suited me, picking the artists for Mariposa. So I did that for 11 years. So and I've still kept my my finger in the pie, so to speak. Like this year, I'm actually doing a workshop because it's the 65th anniversary this year.
That's right.
I'm doing a workshop with Owen McBride, who was a performer from 1964 on, and Owen is still around and very very much still a part of Mariposa too. I guess I'm the official historian since I wrote the book on it.
Yeah,
Exactly.
You're the person to go to.
Yeah.
So what led you to kind of take on the role of the historian of the Mariposa Folk Festival?
Well, history was my major in university. I taught history for many years, and I just sort of like knowing the history of anything I'm involved with.
I wanted to ask, you mentioned about 1972 being a year of note for the festival. What was it about 1972?
Well, nobody knew that it was going to be so special. It had a great lineup. It had people like Bonnie Raitt and John Prine. And I went because I was a real Murray McLaughlin fan. And Murray was just sort of starting out at that time. And so I went to see him on the Saturday workshop. And he gets up on the stage and he says, "I'm not going to be playing today." And I was very let down. I thought, that's disappointing. He says, "My friend Joni Mitchell is here from Los Angeles." So Joni Mitchell got up, sang 5 songs, and I'd never seen her in concert before, and I never saw her again either. That was my only time ever seeing Joni Mitchell. And then she said, "I have a friend here from Los Angeles as well, Jackson Browne." So Jackson Browne got up and did some numbers, and
Oh my goodness!
knew who he was at the time. And then the next day, Bruce Cockburn had a concert at about 4:00 in the afternoon, and he got up and said, "I'm not going to be doing my concert today. I'm giving it up for Neil Young." And it was at the time that Neil Young was was sort of on his own solo, doing solo stuff like Harvest, and it was apparently the only performance he did in all of 1972 was that 1 hour at Mariposa, and then on the Sunday, Bob Dylan showed up. And nobody knew he was coming, but he came to see a guy named Leon Redbone, who was kind of an oddball, but really interesting musical performer. And so Bob came to see him, and then Gordon Lightfoot showed up as well. Just dropped in on
my goodness.
To round it all up.
Like everybody.
yeah. And Lightfoot actually got on a picnic table for a small group of people, maybe about 30 or 40 people, and sang a few songs with the Good Brothers sitting in behind him. And Dylan actually asked if he could sing something, but the organizers said no. And the reason they said no was they were afraid that, people were spread. There were like, maybe 20,000 people there. They were afraid that everybody would rush that one little stage where like Dylan would be playing. So they said, no, we better not, just for safety's sake. So Bob Dylan never played Mariposa, but there were a couple of times when he came close to being there.
Wow. Were you there?
Yes.
At that?
Yeah.
Oh, you were there. So you saw this all unfolding.
I was very young.
Yeah.
That's amazing, though.
Yeah.
What a lineup. Yeah, for sure. And it just came out of nowhere.
It kind of certainly piqued my interest in Mariposa again. So, yeah.
That's super cool.
And then you said you didn't go again until you didn't start going back to Mariposa until the 2000s when they came back to Orillia?
I actually went one year when it was in Bracebridge, Ontario. It was very much scaled down, and they had it in a park at Bracebridge. From 2000 on, I haven't missed a festival, either mostly as volunteers. The last few years that I was there, my only job after I quit being artistic director, my only job was to escort Gordon Lightfoot around the festival, which was pretty exclusive and kind of exciting.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing.
That's really cool. I guess, what is it about the festival for you that makes it so special, that keeps you coming back to it in all various capacities that you do?
Yeah, well, it's always the music, is the key thing. It's the type of music that I like. Like I like singer-songwriters, and I like, acoustic. The sound of an acoustic guitar is, I'd have to rank that as one of my favorite sounds, along with a baby's laugh. There's a park. It's right across from where I live, as a matter of fact, across the lake. And Tuttut Park is just a beautiful setting. It's like surrounded by water. So wherever you're sitting, watching, you can usually see the water. And I don't know. It's just the whole ambiance of the festival. It's like a little fair that pops up for 3 days, and then it's gone again. And it's just there's just some magic to that, I think.
Tell me about, I guess the book. Like, tell me about the history of the folk festival.
Well, it started in Orillia. There was a man who worked for CBC. His name was John Fisher, and he was actually nicknamed Mr. Canada because he was always promoting Canada. And he came to Orillia back in 1961, and he was trying to tell towns how to encourage tourism. He was using the Stratford Festival and Stratford as his example. And in the audience that night for his talk was Ruth Jones and her husband. And Ruth, she and her husband were both real folk fans. And folk music, especially for young people like you, folk music was actually very, very, very popular at that time. She thought, well, that would be nice in Orillia. Stratford has its Shakespeare Festival. We could have a folk music festival. She knew some of the people that were in the number one folk group at the time in Canada was a group called the Travelers. And they did the song, "This Land Is Your Land." It's a Woody Guthrie song, but they changed the words to make it Canadian. So they were the big headliners. And just by sheer energy and will, she made that festival come into being between January and August. But it was very successful. And then the next year, it was even bigger still. And then the third year in Orillia, Orillia was only a town of about 15,000 people at the time. Something like 20,000 people showed up. They wanted to, a lot of university students from Toronto and just people who wanted to come for a good time. And they weren't all coming for the music, unfortunately. And what happened was on the Saturday night, the crowds sort of spilled out into the downtown of Orillia. Where they were holding the festival was sort of up on a hill, and they all went downtown to the main street, and they used the storefronts as toilets. And there were stories of broken beer bottles, and the police just couldn't handle it. The police force was only a handful of men, and they in those days Orillia was a dry town, but people were walking around drinking bottles of beer, and that was considered a real no-no. And there's kind of apocryphal stories about there was a jail, the jail in the police station in Orillia. It only held 2 people, and they were arresting people for disorderly conduct and all that. They put them in the jail cell for a few minutes, and then they'd let them out, and they put the next group of people in, just so they could say you were in jail. Then there were stories about the police grabbing a case of beer from somebody, and the crowd swarming around the cop and stealing the beer case back from him.
Wow.
Also stories of they would put people into the police car on one side, and as they were trying to get through the crowd to get around to the driver's side, the person just went out the other door, and almost like Keystone Cops type of stuff. A lot of the citizens of Orillia, the business people of Orillia, and the town council, they were all so disgusted with it that they said, never again. Like, Orillia, we ban the Mariposa Folk Festival. So the next year, they were going to have it out near Moonstone, or near Coldwater, Ontario. And they had a farm that they had picked out to put on the festival. About a day or so before the festival was to start, the city, or the township council, got an injunction to stop them from putting it on out there. So the organizers, and this really amazes me, knowing how much goes into organizing an event like this. They went down to Toronto and they rented Maple Leaf Stadium, which was a baseball stadium at the foot of Bathurst Street down by the lake. And they rented that for the weekend because the baseball team was playing somewhere else. And one thing about that festival in 1964 was that someone sent me a sound clip of Gordon Lightfoot singing his brand new song, Early Morning Rain. And it's just him in this empty, you can hear it's kind of echoing around the baseball stadium. So that was very cool. The next year, 1965, they moved out to Caledon, south of Orangeville, and at a place called Innes Lake. They had a great lineup in 1965. They had Ian and Sylvia and Gordon Lightfoot and Phil Oakes. I don't know if you guys would know who Phil Oakes is, but folkies from the 60s and 70s would know Phil Oakes. He was a protest singer. And my favorite photo in my book is a picture of Phil singing into a megaphone. The power went off. The power went off, and so they had no lights, no sound. So they quickly aimed a bunch of car lights at the stage, and somebody stood beside Phil as he was singing his set, and with a megaphone, and that's how he sang to the crowd. And,
wow, that's pretty amazing.
Well, it kind of shows just how astute these people were at scrambling when things didn't go exactly right. Because it's happened all through Mariposa's history. It's happened, it happened 2005 or 2006. There was a big storm came through and ruined all the equipment on main stage. And then the same thing basically happened 2013 or 2014. So there have been occasions like that. But then over the years, through the 1970s, it really developed a lot of interesting things. There was a native people's village with a big teepee, and one year, one craftsman from I don't know where. I think he was from Manitoulin Island, but I'm not sure. He made a giant canoe and he worked on it the whole weekend, and people could come and watch him as he was building this canoe. And it's the canoe that for years and years, it may still be there, was in the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto.
Wow.
Yeah. And Sharon, Lois, and Bram, the children's performers.
I'm very familiar.
Everybody knows them.
I grew up on them.
All three of them have been very involved with Mariposa. Well, it was Sharon and Lois who really started the children's area. And the children's area is still really popular. If you have little kids, there's lots for them to do. Like, don't feel this is just an adult festival at Mariposa. It's meant for everybody, and it's still going strong that way. So we really are grateful to them. I say we. I still think of myself as being involved with the festival.
I feel like you're just an honorary member now forever.
Yeah, kind of. And finally, in 2000, the Mariposa board decided, okay, yeah, let's try coming back to Orillia, and it was an absolute success. Steve Earle came, I think it was 2003, and Steve Earle had spent a year in jail for drug offenses, and while he was in jail, he made friends with the Hells Angels.
Oh,
on the Sunday night that Steve was playing, all of a sudden in the crowd, I was there. I didn't know what happened. They must have had other clothes on. It must have been like Superman taking off their clothes, because all of a sudden there's all these Hells Angels in the park, and we usually had only like 2 or 3 police around as security. All of a sudden, there had to be 100 cops showed up instantly. Wow. But there was no trouble at all. Like, no trouble. The Hells Angels just they wherever Steve plays, they come and support him, and they didn't cause any problem. But it gave some people a bad some people were rather nervous when they saw all these.
Well, yeah. I mean, with reputations, yeah. What about the history of Mariposa, I guess, inspired you to create or write your book? Was it just your knowledge, your vast knowledge, or?
Yeah, really, it's just so many important performers have played at Mariposa. That's one of the big things that really makes me think that it's very much an important cultural institution in Canada. A lot of people, credit, like Gordon Lightfoot himself says, Mariposa helped his career. It certainly it wasn't the starting point for, or wasn't necessarily the catalyst for a lot of people's careers, but it certainly helped them along. But a lot of people, like Bruce Coburn, Murray McLaughlin, and in the more recent times, like Serena Ryder, she started off as just she got in as a showcase, which is you have to audition to get in. I think that's how she got in. I could be wrong about that one. I don't know if you know the group Dalla and the Good Lovelies. They really got their starts at Mariposa, and so that's kind of an important thing. And then the people that have played it over the years are, some of the biggest names certainly in folk music. But even I hired Randy Bachman one year, based on his songwriting. And I thought I was going to get a different show than what I got. He said he was going to come with a group called the Sadies. Now the Sadies are, they're not really a heavy rock group or anything. They were all related to the Good Brothers, and there's sort of kind of a country, folky vibe to them. But when they came with Randy, they played as if they were BTO. So we got a rock show that year, and
amazing.
Yeah. And Peter Yarrow, from Peter, Paul, and Mary, he came, and he was just the sweetest guy. I was told, "Oh, don't hire Peter Yarrow. He's really an arrogant man." He was just the exact opposite of that. He couldn't have been nicer. Don McLean, like for me, that's one of the highlights of being an artistic director was having him come. He played all his big hits, and then he had everybody up singing American Pie. Everybody in the crowd standing on their feet singing American Pie along with him. It's just really touching. And then the most special moment, probably the most special moment, I would say, was Gordon Lightfoot had an aneurysm in 2002. And he almost died. He had to have several operations. It really altered his singing and his voice. And it seemed like he was never going to perform again, which was a tragedy for any Canadian folk music fan. But then in 2004, he just all of a sudden showed up with his limousine. They pulled in backstage, and he asked if he could sing one song. And he got up and sang one song. And nobody expected it. Nobody knew it was going to happen. So the audience, you could have heard a pin drop. And then when he, when he was done, the cheering was just so loud. I'm sure they could hear it in Barrie.
Yeah,
it was really touching.
Incredible.
Yeah.
It just sounds like so many of these moments over the history and the lifetime so far of Mariposa Folk Festival.
And what I like is, it started in Orillia, and, it went touch and go. It went to Toronto. It went all over the place. And it kind of made a successful comeback in Orillia. Like Orillia, it sounds like Orillia ended up really embracing the festival right after all, and it's become like a mainstay, like you said. Like it's a very big, everybody knows the Mariposa Folk Festival, that happens up here, right?
Exactly.
Why don't you tell me about, what it was like to write the book, right? Like how long did it take? How did you, I guess, did all the research, or how did you end up writing the book? Tell me about the process.
There was a book written in the 70s, but it was kind of a strange collage almost of stories, and there was a little bit of a history in it, and I found out afterwards that it was some of that history was inaccurate. So it had sort of been done. It's called For What Time I'm in This World. It's out of print, but I managed to find a deleted copy at North York Library one time. So I had that to go on. So I had an initial, would have been written up until about 1974 or something. Mm-hmm. But then every once in a while we would have a cause to give some of the history for people interviewing us, and people sort of wanted to know about what it was like coming back to Orillia and why wasn't it in Toronto anymore. So I kind of took on that job as the unofficial historian. One of our guys who had been on the board of directors, he met up with a publisher from Dundurn Press one night at a government do down in Toronto, and he had mentioned that he was with Mariposa, and she said, well, I'll bet you there's an interesting history or story to be written there. So he said that I was kind of the unofficial historian, and he thought I was a good writer because I had written up, biographies of the artists and things like that. So we went down, we met with Dundurn Press, and they said, yeah, let's go ahead and let's try a book. So I started writing it, and I was able to draw on my wife. She had kept scrapbooks of everything that was either in the Toronto Star or the Orillia Packet and Times or Orillia Today. She kept like actual physical and kept like in chronological order. So I was able to just go through that right up till 2017. So the time between 2000 and 2017, we had all these newspaper files. So I was able to kind of draw on that, plus my own experience of being, in the back rooms and doing the organizing. My previous dog, he had to have a big serious operation. So I sat him down right beside, we didn't want him to move around too much. So I sat him right beside me, had my books all around me and my computer in my lap, and I typed the book while my dog lay there and recovered. And I was able to get through it in a space of about 3 or 4 months, maybe. I wrote the entire book.
Wow.
Amazing.
And then went through all the, the editing process and all that. And it was published in 2017. So, there have been things that have happened since, but it's still a pretty, I like to think that it's pretty accurate. I got great reviews for it.
Yeah.
if I do have to say so myself.
Where can people pick up a copy of it?
At the festival. So I'll have copies at my workshop, and there'll also be copies in the it's called the Emporium, where you can buy performer CDs and clothing and paraphernalia for the festival.
That's awesome.
That's really cool.
The Orillia Museum also has some copies too.
Oh, great.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
that's good to know too.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's the name of it? Just for people that are listening and not actually watching.
Right. It's called the Mariposa Folk Festival, A History.
Is there anything in particular we haven't touched on that you feel you want to?
Well, I think if they've never been to the festival, I say there's like something for everyone. There's a type of music for everyone. There's usually all kinds of like, for instance, this year the Sheepdogs are who are probably Canada's top rock group right now.
Yeah.
They're performing, so it's not necessarily the kumbaya, we shall overcome type of folk music that people maybe think about folk music being. It's very much a real eclectic mix of styles. And
so let me ask you this, because I think in the podcast that we did with Pam and Spencer, I asked the same thing, but how would you describe folk music then? Because like you said, like it may get confusing, or people may think it's like a kumbaya, like, but what is folk music to you, or how would you describe it for people?
Oh, I wrote pages about that in my book, coming to the conclusion that it's really difficult to define. Folk music used to mean music of the people, and you sang along, and I think Pete Seeger was probably the best example of that. Like every Pete Seeger concert, you ended up singing as much as the performer did, and I think it's moved away from that. A lot of it is singer-songwriter type of stuff. I think songwriting really has become the what defines folk music, and I also tend to think of it as being acoustic music. But then you get a performer like Danny Michel who plays an electric guitar, and it's just him, and he sings just great songs that he's written himself. So I'm sorry, I can't really give you a really good definition of it. It's Americana is how it gets described in the United States, but it's everything from country music to blues. That's all part of folk, right? They all folk rock, like Blue Rodeo. Those guys. What they do, I would call that folk music almost. But then, and I've heard that. I've heard that Bruce Springsteen being described as a folk singer, or Johnny Cash as a folk singer.
Yeah.
It just sort of depends. I think it depends on the kind of music that you like.
That's interesting.
I don't know if that makes sense or not, but
no, it does. And I think, as you were talking, I was just kind of thinking, I was like, I wonder if folk, it almost like it becomes like the main, where all these other different genres kind of ended up moving into. Like you said, there's a little bit of country, there's a little bit of rock, there's a little bit of all these kind of different things that get enmeshed that could be folk music, right? I was like, maybe folk is kind of like
it's a commonality.
It's a commonality, right? Where that is very, very attuned to, like you said, songwriting, and could be acoustics, I guess. But yeah.
And I think a lot of genres like rock music, for example, in the 60s, like there were groups like the Byrds who they took traditional folk songs and electrified them and put a drum beat to it. And that was really the kind of music that I grew up with.
Well, I think that answers all of our questions. Thank you very much, Mike, for it was very interesting, right? And what you just told us is probably just like a small part of all the little stories and things that are in the book. So it's really interesting to be able
that's
to...
that only touches on what's in here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm gonna grab a copy.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to actually read it and see all the different little stories, right, that come up with, because it's quite interesting, right, how it became what it is today, right? All the hardships, all the good things, all the impromptu musicians, and all that kind of stuff. That's
good. Okay. Yeah,
right,
thanks.
awesome. Well, thank you very much, Mike, for being here with us. And yeah,
enjoyed it. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the entire episode. All the links and info you heard in this conversation will be featured in the show notes on our website, villagermagazine.ca/podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing to our channels like YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you're listening from, so you never miss an episode. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.